All right, good evening. By my clock, it is now 6 p.m., so we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Welcome, everybody, to the Planning Commission meeting for this lovely February 14th. Let's start with Pledge of Allegiance, so please join me. Megan, could I ask for your help with a roll call, please?
Commissioner Houghton?
Here.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Here.
Commissioner Khan will be absent. Commissioner Tolley?
Here.
Vice Chair Cooley?
Here.
Chair Munoz?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on right along to item number 2, which is public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda. So this is the public's opportunity to come forward and speak up on anything that's not on the schedule for us to discuss tonight. Do we have any speaker cards, Megan, for public comment?
Chair, haven't received any speaker slips so far. They are located on the table up here, so if you would like to speak on any items on the agenda, please fill one out so I know when to call your name.
Sure.
And at the time, it looks like we don't have any speakers.
Sounds good. So seeing nobody coming forward, we'll go ahead and move on to our consent calendar, item 3, which is consideration of the minutes for the January 24th session. Commissioners, any discussion or motions?
I'm just going to note that I'm going to abstain because I wasn't at the previous meeting.
Okay. Sounds good.
I'll move the consent item.
We have a motion.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
I believe that passes with 4 ayes and 1 abstention. So let's move right on to our public hearing, our one item tonight, a public hearing, which is a discussion on phase 3 of the Avila Ranch Development Plan, located over on 4240 and 4280 Earthwood Lane. I believe we have our contract planner, John Rickenbach, with us.
Thank you very much. Give me a second to try to put it on the right screen. All right. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. I'm John Rickenbach, and so tonight what we're going to be doing is reviewing a portion of phase 3, the R4 portion of the Avila Ranch project. And although many of you are relatively new on the Planning Commission, this project has been through many times and you're probably familiar with it at this point. I will go through some of the history to get here. We also have the applicant team to present after I make my presentation. They'll go into more of the details on the project itself. I'll focus on the history and some of the regulatory aspects more than that. Let's see if I can get this. Okay, so let's start with the recommendation. This is all in the staff report, but I'll go through it here to make it clear. The recommendation is to adopt the draft resolution, modified slightly, and I'll note that here how it's modified, approving the proposed site design and layout for the R4 component of the Avila Ranch project to be developed within phase 3 of the Avila Ranch Development Plan, including a density bonus to increase the unit count of the R4 component from 125 to 145 units, which does include 59 affordable units, and incorporates the recommendations of the Architectural Review Commission. That includes a fence height exception, sign exception, and a parking exception, all based on findings and subject to conditions of approval. The one change from what was originally included as a condition of approval that we recommend is here, and that has to do with the Affordable Housing Agreement and how it's implemented. There was a condition 16, and what we recommend is striking text in there that is intended now to clarify that what we're really asking for is to be in conformance with the Affordable Housing Agreement that's been negotiated and set forth. The stricken lines make it a little less clear on how to implement that, so we just cut right to the chase and make it so we're completely consistent with the housing agreement. Otherwise, all other conditions are as recommended in your packet. So let's talk about previous approvals. The Avila Ranch project was first approved in 2017, so it's been 7 years. There was a development plan, a development agreement, a vesting tentative track map, and a certified final EIR that covered all of that. At the time, the overall project was found consistent with city policies, including the community design guidelines. That's important because any subsequent action that relates to any component of the project, by definition, was already found to be consistent with city policies. It's just a question, are the specific designs that come forward still consistent, or are they, is there something we have to address there? That's why it's being brought forth to Planning Commission, as all the other components of the project have been. Here's things that have happened. Other actions since the approval in 2017. We've had phase one, the final map being recorded, phase one public improvement plans. All 6 phases, we have had grading plans. Phases 1 through 3 for the R2 development has been approved. That's 297 units. Phase 5, that's the R1 development. That's 101 units. You see it all out in action out there right now. And then other things that are in progress include phases 2 through 6 public improvement plans and jurisdictional permitting. So it's certainly it's a project in various phases and in action, and this is the next phase of that project. The context of the location, for those not familiar, this is within the airport area specific plan in the southern end of the city. It's the southwestern corner of that on the north side of Buckley Road, more or less east of Vachel Lane, and it's west of the airport. So this area has already been pre-planned through the development plan approved in 2017. This is a component of that. And so we're looking at the northwesternmost component off of Earthwood Lane, more or less, and it's the highest density portion of the project, the R4 portion. And so it's adjacent to the R2 portion, which is to the south and to the east, and business park designated land to the west, and manufacturing land designated to the north. So it's a 4-acre site, a little over 4 acres, and it's got 2 components. It's really 2 projects. The first component is the market rate component. That's called the Anacapa project by the developers. That includes 85 units, all situated within 2 freestanding 3-story buildings. It's east of Earthwood Lane, and it's on 1 consolidated lot. It includes studios to 2-bedroom units ranging from 401 to 917 square feet, smaller units. 43 units are in one of the buildings, the other 42 are in the other. It's all contemporary mid-century architecture, consistent with what was anticipated in the development plan and reviewed by the Architectural Review Commission, who found the design consistent with the guidelines and what was approved within the development plan. The second component of this overall project, it's really a second project, is the affordable housing component. The Sendero project, that's on the west side of Earthwood Lane. That's actually 60 units, 59 of which are considered affordable housing. The other one would be the caretaker's unit, all of which are within a 3-story building focused around a central courtyard. 20 of those 60 units are proposed as a density bonus. We'll get into that a bit more. And as I say, on the west side of Earthwood Lane, it's 1 to 3 bedroom units, ranging in size from 748 to 935 square feet. Similar in size to on the other side of the road. The units don't go as small as on the other side of Earthwood. This project also has a 1,000 square foot community room, a 5,200 square foot central courtyard. Architecturally is similar to the market rate side. Just a quick layout here, and it's within your packet, so I'm not going to belabor this, but I will say that the applicant team in their presentation may want to go over some of the design details. I'm not going to do that in any great detail here, but you do see the relative layout on the 2 sides. Taking access on the parking, on the east side, you're getting it straight from Earthwood Lane. On the west side, you're going down that cul-de-sac on Cessna Court to come in from behind, but you could go from Earthwood Lane on the northern end of the site. You'll also see a pullout for a bus stop right there in front of the affordable housing units on the west side of Earthwood Lane. Again, a bird's eye view of what it would look like. This is the market rate side. This is the east side of the site. To give you an idea architecturally how it would look. Again, I'm not going to go through these in detail, but the applicant team may want to do this to show how it's designed, and you may have questions about this. Again, we have some elevations just to give you some context if you have questions about that. Here we have the affordable housing side. On the west side, the Sendero side, it looks architecturally similar, materials are similar, massing is similar. Here we have one building, it's different than on the other side, which was two buildings on the east side. Again, I'll just go through these quickly here. I do want to point this slide out here. This is a slide from the Avila Ranch Development Plan that was approved in 2017. So this is not a new thing. This is the cookbook, essentially, that the applicant team had to work from. And in that, their intent was to be consistent with what was in the plan. There's one small change that they proposed, which staff supports, and that's to change the front setback standard from 15 feet, which was prescribed in the development plan, to 10. And the reason for that was to allow for the design to include the amount of housing that's being proposed, and it allows and large enough units within the housing. Basically, it meets the intent of the housing and design goals within the development plan better. It's also consistent with the setback that was updated citywide for the R4 zone. So it's not really a new thing, but it was something that had to be addressed within the development plan. The development itself this is the statistics. I won't go through this in great detail, but it does show, and this is in your packet, it shows the setbacks, that one change I just pointed out right there, the maximum structure height, which is again consistent with what was allowed within the development plan, with only the architectural projections going a little higher than the 35 feet that's allowed within the R4 zone per the municipal code. And then we have the maximum lot coverage. Again, there's no standard here, but what's being proposed is within city standards. Same with the minimum lot area. Bike parking and automobile parking, this provides a summary of all that. I won't go into great detail. Staff's gone through this in detail with the applicant team. And one of the features that is interesting is to comply with the bicycle parking or with the parking. What they proposed was to reduce slightly the total amount of parking and replace 2 of those parking spaces with 10 bike spaces, which is allowed per municipal code. In the end, it makes it consistent with the municipal code. And the emphasis here then is on bike parking to a greater extent than would have other been normally just the regular allowance per the code. The density per the Avila Ranch Development Plan would be 125 units, but they're proposing 145 units. They're getting a density bonus. All those actions are covered by the Avila Ranch final EIR, with the exception of those 20 units, which were not covered within the original EIR. I'll get into how that was covered or addressed within this project toward the end of the presentation. One of the things that they are applying for is a fence height exception. The municipal code requires 6 feet along side and rear setbacks and up to 9 when there's a retaining wall as part of that. There are exceptions allowed for topography. And in this case, we do have an interesting situation. They propose a slightly different look at this because of topography and a drainage channel along the back of the property. And that's along the north and western boundaries. And what that ends up being then is a little over 9 feet high fence on the north property line, 13 on the west property line. And you'll see in the graphics why that's necessary. And this is the area we're talking about. In those little red squares within the yellow square, where we have a fence height exception, we've got illustrations of what that would look like. So along the north end, you've got a fence height now along a drainage swale that when you add it all up, it does exceed the city's standard. But it's what this allows us to do is to put in the drainage and make the drainage work and also provide a better barrier from the development to the north. And in the end, this was the best solution. The only other kind of solution you would have had would have involved massive changes to the drainage structure. So this is one of those exceptions that the code allows for. And so this is something we worked closely with the team to come up with this. A similar situation on the west side, again, where you have drainage issues or drainage infrastructure, and it allows for the fencing to make sense and provide a barrier that's appropriate. They also asked for a monument sign exception. Now, the municipal code does not allow monument signs in residential zones unless there's an exception approved, and you're not allowed to have illuminated signs either. But the Avila Ranch Development Plan does allow monument signs with an agrarian theme at 3 different roundabouts within the Avila Ranch. Now, this is not within any of those roundabouts, so these This monument sign exception is for something other than at the roundabout. So what they propose is 2 illuminated monument signs, one for each development. They're both about 5.5 by 7.5 feet. Total sign area is 20 square feet, and they reflect the contemporary architecture of the development. Now, that's in addition to 3 other monument signs at those roundabouts within Avila Ranch. This is what they would look like, and illuminated from the outside. So ARC looked at this closely, and the proposed monument signs, they had recommendations for that. One is that they should be externally lit, not internally lit. Slightly reduce the height of the proposed roof projections. This is not just on the signage, but there are other recommendations. Currently proposed as high as 38 feet, and to make the tallest arch roof projections more rectilinear in design. And finally, to include enhancements to the parking lot paving to provide more visual cues for wayfinding, make it easier to get around, and a little more visual interest. That included some additional decorative pavement between the 2 buildings on the Anacapa site. So the applicant team, after ARC, went back and addressed their recommendations, and that's what you've got in front of you. So they did make the roof projections to be more rectilinear, no higher than 37 feet 10. That's one of the attachments to your packet. They also included colored and stamped concrete at key locations throughout the parking lots as ARC directed. They did make it so the monument signs are to be externally lit, and that's a condition, condition 5. And finally, there's a revised sheet that shows more detail about different lighting concepts that were proposed than what ARC had the benefit of seeing. So now we have a little more detail on pedestrian lighting, for example, and the minimization of off-site glare and impacts to nearby residences. So they did address those issues post-ARC, and that's what you're seeing. And staff concurs with their changes that those are appropriate. One of the aspects of the project originally approved back in 2017 was a development agreement. And the development agreement provides the overarching project direction, provides key direction on project intent. And here are the critical aspects. It allows some degree of flexibility in project implementation, perhaps inflammation. And what it does is include performance standards to address energy use and works in conjunction with the development plan. What all that means is they are required to do certain things in their development, including building public improvements, which they've been doing, in exchange for a guarantee of what they get to do, and that is to say, consistent with what we've had presented here to us. So what they've basically done is follow the cookbook aspects of the development agreement to create this project. Now, one of the aspects that's a little bit different is how the affordable housing is being implemented. The development agreement calls for 24 lower, 8 lower, and 8 moderate income housing units. It's 40 total to be spread to the 2 locations on either side. But the applicant proposed a slightly different approach. 59 affordable units, that is to say more affordable units, but put them all on one location, that is to say west of the Earthwood side of the road, west of Earthwood, in the affordable housing part of the development. Now, in order to provide those additional 19 affordable units, which would be moderate income housing, a density bonus was applied, and that resulted in those 19 homes and 1 caretaker unit. Now, that concept, which does differ from the development agreement, was put forth to the City Council in January so they could go over that and make sure they concurred that that was consistent with the intent of the development agreement, which they did find was the case. Since in the end, you did get more affordable housing, and from a larger standpoint, it seemed appropriate from a city goal standpoint relative to affordable housing, but it did differ from the specific words in the development agreement. So that was addressed in January. There was an addendum to the EIR that addressed that, and we move forward here with this scheme here. On the proposed housing, what we have is 145 units. This compares what the development agreement said, what the development plan said, and what is actually being proposed, which is the right-hand column. For the unit count, you can see it's 145 units. That's more than what the development agreement said. In the unit sizes, the ranges are more or less similar, actually smaller units than what were envisioned within the development agreement. There, the idea was to create a slightly more affordable product, making them a little smaller. And then at the end of the day, you can see you end up with 59 affordable units in comparison to 40, which were called for in the DA. And as I say, the City Council approved that concept. With regard to energy, I won't go through this in any great detail, but the development agreement does address what needs to be done. And the bottom line would be that the city's energy standards, which were actually adopted subsequent to the development agreement, trump the development agreement concept, so that they're meeting the standards that, in fact, they're exceeding what was originally approved back in 2016 by 10%. And essentially, they're going to be consistent with the 2019 energy codes. Within that, I'm not going to go through this in any great detail, but if you do have questions about this, we certainly can answer that. But the development plan energy provisions are a little different than what the 2019 approved standards are, which are actually in excess of what was exceeded or what was expected in 2017. And the project will be consistent with the 2019 code. So among other things that the applicant is doing to respond to that, they're providing for all electric homes and many sustainability features consistent with the development agreement, which does allow some flexibility and provide some performance standards. And there's more details provided in the agenda report, which you have in front of you. Relative to design standards, the development plan that was approved in 2017 includes standards related to site and building design, again, intended to be consistent with the development agreement. There's some flexibility, and at the end of the day, the applicant proposal for their R4 standards is consistent with the intent of the DA and zoning regulations. There is within the packet sort of a very detailed blow by blow how the consistency is achieved for each of the different aspects. Now back on the CEQA compliance, as I said, an EIR was certified in 2017 to cover the Avila Ranch development plan. However, when there are some minor changes, you may have to address that with subsequent CEQA work. That was done a month ago to address the timing of a mitigation measure related to transportation, that is to say, some bike improvements along Buckley Road. So an addendum was prepared to address that. What an addendum does is it explains what the differences might be, but explains why there's no new impacts or why the severity of existing impacts isn't any worse, and that there are no new mitigation measures. That was done a month ago for that mitigation measure, and it's done again this time to address the additional 20 dwelling units allowed by the density bonus, to say why there wouldn't be any new or more severe impacts. There's a traffic study that was prepared in support of that to help draw that conclusion. You do have the addendum in your packet, but at the end of the day, all the impacts that were addressed and identified in the final EIR are still true, as is the level of impact and the mitigation measures that were applicable at the time and still remain applicable. Which leads us back to the recommendation. I won't read it all through again the second time, but it's to adopt the draft resolution as modified with the one change to condition of approval 16, as I described earlier. And with that, I could take any questions, or we might hold those and let the applicant team make their presentation. I leave it back to you.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Commissioners, maybe we can start with questions for staff, knowing that the applicant's coming. Do you have some questions for staff?
I did.
Please, go ahead. We'll start with you.
John, excellent report.
Thank you.
There's language in the project plan about an alternative compliance request for long-term bicycle parking.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to have to do with how much of, I think the project proposes some of the bike parking be upstairs, and that raises a lot of questions since there's no elevators. But they're proposing an alternative. I didn't see that. And condition number 29 that deals with bicycle parking just leaves everything to the transportation manager, which is not necessarily a bad idea, but I've just wondered if this got resolved earlier or isn't still an issue, or what happened here.
We've resolved this, and maybe the best way to do this one is when the applicant comes up, they can explain how the bicycle planning works, but at the end of the day, city staff is going to have to approve that as consistent with the condition. But I think it's best if we let them address that when they come up.
Okay, good. Thank you. That was it.
Yeah, I have a question for staff. Has there been any public opposition or anything that's been sent to the city for any of the phases? Just curious.
I'm not aware of any on this particular right now. There are letters that come in every now and then, but if you're asking for a major source of opposition or a big, I'm not aware of any of that. Staff may have another perspective, but I don't know about that.
Speaking of letters, there was a Western Carpenters email that was part of the packet. I was wondering if staff could just kind of give us a quick synopsis of what that's all about, because it was quite the read.
Sure, I can do my best to summarize that letter. Like you said, it was over 200 pages and it came in a few hours before the January City Council meeting. As I understood it, there were arguments suggesting that we were unable to grant the density bonus because in the previous EIR, there had been statements of overriding consideration that were made. And by virtue of that, and adding additional 20 units, there are new impacts. That was one argument, and I'm trying to recall the other one, basically suggesting that the city needed to prepare an additional or a subsequent EIR for these additional 20 units that are contemplated. So in the staff report, you'll see that we addressed the argument about density bonus and clarified here that pursuant to state law, the Planning Commission's hands are tied a little bit in terms of denying a density bonus when the applicant has proposed a project that clearly qualifies for the bonus. And then with respect to, subsequent environmental review, an addendum was prepared, and the addendum will basically stand the legal standard of review as substantial evidence. So long as there's substantial evidence in the record to support our decision that a subsequent environmental impact report was not required, then legally it is staff's opinion that we're in a good position.
Cool, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One last question. This is in the airport area, specific plan area. Is this subject to the Airport Land Use Commission? I'm assuming it is.
It is, and that was addressed back in 2017, and actually addressed again when the airport land use plan was updated, actually made development a little more permissive within the area, so it became even easier to some extent.
That's what I assumed. Thank you.
Other questions for staff? I do have a couple of quick ones. First one, I'm assuming these are deed restricted affordable units, or are they affordable by design?
Well, there is a deed restricted component, it's the
Okay.
59, and then there's the market rate component, the 85.
Yeah, okay, right, market rate, yeah, I understand that component. On the height, I think you mentioned the arched elements were 38 feet and then they reduced them to 37.10, so we lost 2 inches, is that right?
That's right. I don't think the issue that ARC had was with the height as much as with the design.
Oh, just, okay, gotcha,
And
the
so in
aesthetic.
redesigning them, it lost 2 inches, but it created a more rectilinear design, which they
I see,
liked
okay.
better.
I think I misunderstood that request. Thank you for that clarification. And the last one, maybe I just want to confirm. So what you said a second ago, if I understood correctly, is that if a project qualifies for a density bonus, it's very hard for a commission to deny it. Was that
To
correct?
deny the bonus,
To deny the
correct.
yeah, correct. Okay.
The suggestion that, or I guess the standard that letter was advancing seemed to suggest that the applicant had been also requesting incentives or concessions under the density bonus
I
law,
see.
where in that case, your hands are also tied, but there is room to deny the incentives, concessions, or waivers if certain pretty tough findings are made, but
Right.
it is possible. I've reviewed the statute multiple times, and when it comes to the density bonus itself, so long as they are providing the required amount of housing at certain affordability levels, they are entitled to the density bonus. And it is my understanding the applicant is not making a request for any incentives or concessions where we would have limited discretion to deny those.
Okay. Thank you. No, I want to thank you for that clarification. I wanted to make sure that I understand that typically, unless there's some overwhelming evidence to suggest that we should not, that these are a pretty straightforward request. So with that, can we go to slide 29 very quickly? I wanted to see the 125 versus 145 breakdown. Yes, thank you. So it seems to me here, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it seems like we're gaining one thing, but we're losing two. So we're gaining 20 additional units, but in that exchange, we're losing the lower income units, and we're losing the disbursement of the affordable units throughout two facilities instead of one, or buildings, excuse me. Can you speak about the RENA numbers that the city has for the low income, very low income, and extremely low income, and how the proposed scenario versus the approved one plays into those requirements?
Tyler, I might defer to you on the RENA question, and I can handle some of it, but I'll let you start here.
Sure. And just so I'm in the slide here, the project's gaining a significant number of affordable units, not losing, right?
Yeah, correct. But we're, under the new ones, it seems like there's no lower income.
It's about the
unit.
categories.
It's about the categorization of the affordability level, I guess we could call it, right?
Well, the DA required 24, and the proposal is for, oh, I see what you're saying.
Right.
Gotcha.
Low versus lower.
So to address the RENA question, actually moderate income is our biggest gap at this point. So
Okay.
I don't have those numbers right off the top of my head, but I do know that that's our largest
Okay.
and most difficult category to fill, mainly because of the subsidy required to gain those units is much larger. So the low income are the projects that we see with our affordable housing partners where they get qualify for tax credits and they're able to get additional financing from different sources. So those are actually low income. We're doing pretty well. It's the moderate that we have a larger gap.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, because that's kind of where I was going with this. But it seems like under the proposed scenario, then that would be more advantageous for the city's needs, right? With the increase in moderate units, basically.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So in that case, it sounds like we're gaining two things, but maybe just losing the one of having them be a little bit more isolated into just the one building. Okay, I'll stop there and maybe we can hear from the applicant. Thank you very much. So, Commissioner, I didn't see you. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the presentation. And as I understand, you are contracted, but you're a city, effectively city, speaking for the city in this case, right?
Correct.
Okay. Early on, you had some strike-through language, and the part that was struck through was a sentence that included the phrase "in proportion to," but also concurrent with. And I think "in proportion to" is what has changed, right? Market versus affordable, but the concurrency part, are we striking through that as well? And is that something that we want to do?
So again, I might defer to Tyler a little bit here. But what we're really trying to do here is to be consistent with the affordable housing agreement that was worked out between city staff and the development team, which does address aspects of the timing and how that's going to be done. And Callie, maybe I'll let you just handle it from here.
Good evening, Callie Taylor, Associate Planner. So in this one, the language that is struck out is standard language in our conditions because it's from our inclusionary housing ordinance. So it's kind of a standard thing. In this one, we have a very specific affordable housing agreement for Phase 3 that went to City Council on January 23rd, and City Council approved the Phase 3 affordable housing agreement. It has timing triggers in Section 5 of that agreement that require that the affordable housing is issued building permits and they begin construction by the 500th unit within Avila Ranch. There's 720, if this is approved, it would be 740 total units within Avila. So that would basically hold 240 units for issuance to ensure that the affordable housing gets constructed. We won't issue the 550th market rate unit until the affordable housing is completed. So those very specific timing triggers will ensure that the affordable housing is completed. And it kind of keeps the master developer engaged in ensuring that completion.
Okay, so it's key to the bigger picture, it sounds like, not just this phase 3 part, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
The majority of Avila Ranch's inclusionary housing is included in this phase, so it is really a requirement of the master developer. They have partnered with the affordable housing developer to ensure that that gets completed.
Okay, so we can get to 500 or so, but you can't go, what was the number?
At 500 units, they have to pull building permits and begin construction.
Okay.
And by 550 units, they have to have substantially completed construction.
And what's our number right now?
I think we've only finalized 63 units out at Avila Ranch. So they're really just beginning construction. We estimate that this will probably take 2 to 3 years to get permits issued. They need to apply for tax credits from the state, get building permits done. They have several steps to go through before they actually begin construction on this phase.
Okay, so maybe this is an applicant question, but I wonder if they're intending to build Anacapa first, Sendero second, or what the phasing looks like there. But it sounds like they don't have to start on Sendero until we get to 500 on market rate, and then they have to start, and then they don't get number 551 or whatever until they get a CO on all
That's
that.
correct.
Okay. I also had a question about low versus lower versus moderate, and thank you for bringing that up, Juan. What about lower impact or lower income? Because that's what we're losing here. So you said we're hurting for moderate. We have plenty of low. How are we doing on lower income? Because that's where we have none of those now.
That might be one that I could answer. I spoke with our housing coordinator on this as we were reviewing the project. So lower is kind of a general classification that includes both low and very low. So it's kind of a funny term that we don't actually see that often in conditions or in the RHNA numbers, because it really encompasses the larger category. So when they wrote the development agreement, they called them lower income, and basically it lets them choose what category specifically they want to.
They thought maybe it wasn't hard enough to keep track of it, and so they went to.
Yes.
So lower includes low and very low.
That's correct.
Is there another one below that?
I think there is.
Yeah, there's a footnote there, the second footnote.
Oh, there it is. Oh,
kinda
I'm
gives
sorry.
you the full
Right,
categories.
Huh. Okay. All right. We should probably keep rolling, but I did have a couple more things, and maybe some of these belong in the next section. The airport is right there. There's planes that take off right there. What are we doing? What is involved in this? And maybe this isn't relevant to the density bonus, which is really what we're reviewing here tonight, and maybe it's been completely handled before, but are we protecting the occupants noise-wise from the airport noise, and are we protecting the airport from the occupants once they move in and are hearing 737s take off?
So good question, and helpful for those who don't have the history on this. Back in 2017, the applicant team had to go through review with the Airport Land Use Commission with a proposed project that they had, and it had to be consistent with the different zones they put up relative to noise and safety, and there's a general traffic pattern zone and so forth. So they designed their project in such a way to stay out of the zones where there could be a conflict. They ultimately had to get approval from the Airport Land Use Commission, which they did. And so the project is what it is. That's why, for example, you see it's all loaded to the west side of Avila Ranch. You don't see it in the areas that look like it might be shaped like a runway, because that's a zone you can't put it in. Subsequent to that, in the last couple of years, the Airport Land Use Commission updated their plan with better data, even though they've got more airplanes and more flights going out, but they were able to refine where the safety zones were and the noise zones. And actually, it turns out it's a little less restrictive than the old plan was, relative to Avila Ranch anyway. They didn't change their plan significantly at all, but what it did was the new plan was consistent with that plan as well. So they've gone through the gauntlet of working with the Airport Land Use Commission, and as long as they stay within those parameters, which this project does, it's been addressed.
Okay, thanks. And I wonder if there's, maybe this is an applicant thing, but is there anything, when somebody buys a place or rents a place, is there anything they are advised of, or is there a thing they sign says, we promise not to complain too much?
Yeah, a buyer will be notified. There's an airport here and so forth. There's other issues that or similar to that, where they're notified of different hazards and so forth that may be in the area. So yes, those are standard notifications.
Okay, terrific. I have questions about heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. That's maybe for the applicant it's more detailed stuff. You mentioned the bus stop. Is that being involved in the planning of bus routes, and is there going to be a route out there?
So ultimately, yes, there will be. And so what this plan is doing is making it possible for that to occur. And when the bus folks work with the city to work out the routes, this will be pre-planned to make that possible.
And then the last thing you brought up as well about all the affordable in one building versus spread into the two. Is that something we want to discuss? Because that's a significant change, I think. I don't know how I feel about it.
I mean, we're free to discuss anything we'd like, but we can also
So
wait and
what's-
hear from the applicant maybe. And
Okay, well let's peg that for discussion with the applicant too.
yeah,
But
I
what's
definitely
the-
want to revisit it too. So
yeah, it's I'm not sure which way I fall on that one. Part of the idea with affordable housing has been to integrate it with market rate, so that's not just like all over here and we're all over there or whatever. So, but I can see how you might argue the point both ways. So I'm just curious what that discussion will sound like.
I'll just tee it up a little bit, though. That was an issue, a key issue that was that the city council had to actually address relative to the ability to essentially deviate from what the development agreement noted, and that at the end of the day, the concept of concentrating the affordable housing into one side was seen as being a good thing in the sense that that made that project more developable to be able to create that larger group of affordable housing. From a affordable housing developer standpoint, it works better. That's something that maybe the applicant team can address better to address your issue, but it's something that the city council had weighed in on.
Okay, I'm wondering how it's going to work in practice and what kind of experience we're gaining with the affordable housing that we do have in the city and spreading it out versus chunking it. So I have, my other questions are smaller, so I'll wait.
great. Yes.
I just had a very quick follow-up. Thank you for the description of why you're recommending to amend the language in condition 16. And a good summary of what's in section 5 of phase 3, but do we have that section 5 language on one of the slides somewhere? It's not a big deal if no, but just curious.
We could pull it up for you. It'll just take a minute.
Okay. And it doesn't have to be right now. It can be just before we decide on this.
Maybe while we pull it up, we can invite the applicant to come forward and get ready. I don't know if they're interested. I imagine they are interested in speaking with us. So, yeah, welcome. I think we have about 10 minutes, right, for you to share your thoughts with us, and feel free to address comments you've heard already, or I'm sure we'll bombard you with questions after. So
Sure. Get the.
Maybe we could elaborate a little bit on the, we're going to grab the language for you on that section for the timing of the affordable housing. But I did want to clarify that on January 23rd, when council reviewed the affordable housing agreement, they did already approve the change of location. So it's really not an issue that's before the Planning Commission tonight. We were concerned about bringing it to Planning Commission because it was part of the original development agreement. So we first took it to City Council for them to review. They reviewed the Phase 3 affordable housing agreement, which is really the implementation of the development agreement, and they approved that change of location at that time. So we just wanted to kind of clarify what's within the commission's purview tonight, and that change of location has already been approved.
So
by
our purview is pretty strictly limited to the density bonus issue?
It's correct. They did not approve the density bonus at City Council because that requires hearing through this process to be approved by the Planning Commission. But the development agreement and the actual location of the units and the affordable housing agreement is something that's up to the council to approve.
So they aired that out pretty well at the council meeting? Do we have?
It was included within the staff report, and I don't believe it was discussed by the city council, but it was something that they approved with the final map. So they approved of the Phase 2-3 final map that night, and also the affordable housing agreement that went with it.
I think one way to add on to what Callie says, your purview, if you want to look at it this way, The development plan was approved in 2017. There was a map and there was a development agreement and the council had to approve that. The subsequent phases as they come forward, the idea was as long as the development agreement isn't changing, each of those pieces were going to go to ARC and Planning Commission to address design issues primarily, or anything that had to do with planning related issues that had to do with the design of the project. So the development agreement, because it was under question, that's a city council issue. But anything that has to do with the project looks like this, or this is when it's implemented, or how it's implemented more than the when, that's sort of a development agreement part. But that's where your purview is for these issues. And that would be true on the R2 and the R1 and subsequent phases that will come forward to the Planning Commission, if that makes any sense.
Maybe I'd just like to hear quickly from council. I think I understand what our purview here is, but I know sometimes you can get into trouble with extensive deliberations on things that are not on the agenda. Would you prefer we not discuss this tonight, or are we free to ask questions about it if we're just, even if we're not going to make a motion and vote on it?
As I recall the contents of this staff report, the location of this housing is in the staff report, so I think it's okay to ask clarifying questions. But to Callie and John's point, there's no action for the Planning Commission to take tonight. The City Council, to which you guys, report to, has already decided on this matter.
So we're really just up, down on the density bonus tonight.
Or if you have any recommendations that were different than what ARC had recommended.
Thanks.
All right. Let's try one more time. Thank you for your patience.
No worries.
Okay, we're going to try to drop that one slide in here. Then we'll tee up the applicant's presentation in just 1 minute.
Oh. Feels like April Fool's now.
Okay, here we go. Okay, good evening, Chairman Yunus and members of the commission. My name is Emily Ewer. I am with Oasis Associates, here representing the applicant, Wathakastana's Home and CNC Development. This evening, the project architect, Murray Duncan, and I will make a brief presentation and leave the balance of the meeting for that engagement and your ultimate deliberation. I want to thank John and city staff for their review and contributions to helping make this such an exceptional project. Hopefully the PC has taken full advantage of reviewing the submittal and the staff reports. John's presentation did an excellent job of summarizing the project within the context of the various guidance documents and regulations. Let's see, I think if I click or if I scroll. It is, I do not know. Oh, it went to that one. Cool. Okay, I'll give you the next slide cue. So the request tonight is to adopt the resolution approving the site design and layout of the R4 multifamily project that incorporates ARC's recommendations, which is based on the findings and subject to the original 84 mitigation measures, 130 conditions of approval, along with the 45 new conditions of approval as not modified, noted by John, and of course the guidance provided under the airport area specific plan, the Avila Ranch development plan, the Avila Ranch Development Agreement, and the Community Design Guidelines. Murray and I will simply review some of the highlights with you and then touch base on some of those ARC discussion items and a few of the things that you've noted on. Next slide. So John already mentioned this. Avila Ranch is a 6-phase project. We're in phase 3 here tonight. the Sendero project, and the Anacapa project. Here, we also depict the phases that have been approved, which is phases 1, 2, and 3 of the R2 development, as well as phase 5, which was the residential single-family R1 development. Next slide. Cool. Again, entitlement history, just background briefly. 2017, City Council approved this. 4 years later, we got our first approval in 2021 for the R2 product, and then last year, the R1 product. Just want to underscore the substantial time and effort and resources it takes to create a project of this magnitude. And also want to acknowledge our clients, Wealth and Castanos and CNC Developments. They're here with us tonight to thank them for their patience and investment in the city. Next slide. Just a brief update on where we are with our construction activities. You can see and probably hopefully have traveled some of the new offsite improvements, including the Buckley Road extension, widening of Vachel Lane, work at various intersections, multi-purpose trail in the project that connects the 6 parks and open space. Home construction is ongoing for the 297 R2 units. 72 homes are occupied, an additional 48 are under construction. And then with that, I will turn it over to the project architect, Murray, for a bit of design discussion.
Thank you, Emily. I'm Murray Duncan, with project architect, Commissioner Morris, and Commission. I'm going to stay brief. John did a great job in giving you an overview of the project, but I can talk pretty specifically to what we're doing with the project with the market and the affordable. And that's this slide kind of identifies how the unit types are spread. I want to remind the Commission that these are 2 different developers and 2 very different projects. And the intent is to meet the affordable requirements with the proper type of development, meaning a CNC development will be handling the inclusionary or the affordable units. The product type or end user is very different from the market and from the affordable side. The affordable side is a very unique required density to meet a family type product. And in other words, it's got many more amenities built within that project. And it's allowing for, again, families, whereas the market rate are really pretty, they're studios and 2-bedroom units. They're not family oriented. They're more empty nesters, if you will, young adults and couples, if you will. So very different product types, very different requirements for funding. And at the end of the day, this project was designed with that in mind to make it feel like a project, a community, not 2 different projects. So we can move on to the next slide, please. These are composite exterior elevations of the 2 projects. The top slide, view A, you can see queued up in the key map below. That's looking towards the north. So as you're approaching San Luis Obispo, if you will, you will have the Sendero project on your left and the Anacapa project on your right. But if you look at the top exterior elevation, massing and building components, they're identical. The whole idea is this feels like a community, not the affordable side or the market side. It's one community. We have the street that separates, which is a very unique problem for the site, and it actually worked out very well to be able to get the affordable over on the left-hand side of Earthwood, and then the market rate on the right-hand side of Earthwood. View B is the next slide down, and that's looking at Sendero itself. So you can see that in just comparison with Anacapa up above, all the same building components, the articulation, the massing, the color, the whole feel. There's no reduction in quality or a sense of being a more affordable look. The intent is, again, it's equal, edgy, very contemporary today, and a place that would be wonderful to live in. Next slide, please. This is a view coming from San Luis Obispo into the project. We've just come, as you're coming down Earthwood, you're going through an industrial section as you're entering into the site. So we have a setback requirement along the northern edge there that we're using for parking. Well, there's two positive things happen from it. Obviously, we take care of parking, but it also opens up the project to the community as you're being greeted from San Luis Obispo. So you have an open view of both buildings as you're coming in, and they'll always be open. So that's really, I think, a very positive aspect to this project. Senderos on the right-hand side here, and you've got Anacapa on the left. Again, they blend beautifully. They look like one project. The only thing that separates them is the road. The next view down, you can see on the key map, it's looking back towards Anacapa. Anacapa off of Earthwood's got pretty soft elevations. They're smaller massing, so the massing for the market rate units is really perpendicular to Earthwood. And so you don't really get that impact of the size of the project as you're coming from the south, heading north, or from going north to south. So next slide, please. Here's an aerial perspective of Anacapa. This is, again, heading north. We're heading towards San Luis Obispo, and this is giving a sense of how the market rate units will look, 3 stories, how we broke up the massing, and the integration of a lot of architectural fun details. We're using strip lighting, this night sky approved strip lighting as a visual cueing to the entries and the main portals into the project. These are more important, I feel, on the Sendero side, but nonetheless, it's a nice architectural detail that these strip lights and the bollards that are used in the pedestrian pathway, or the paseo, if you will, that's right in the foreground of this building that links the development across to Sendero.
You talking about those vertical bars of light?
Correct. Okay. Vertical bars of light with the wood pillars. So that's an architectural theme that's carried all around all 4 sides of all buildings. So next slide, please. This is Emily wanted to talk a little bit about the aspects that are important to Sendero itself.
So as we've discussed a bit and noted in conditions of approval 14 through 16, Sendero is the affordable component of the project. Both the principals of CNC Development are here with us, Barry and Todd Cottle. They've been developing affordable housing projects for over 25 years. A unique feature of their business model is that they design, finance, build, and also operate and maintain their projects. So that provides them with focusing on the design and durability of construction for that continued maintenance and operation. If there are more specific questions, Barry and Todd are happy to address some of those questions. I think as we've discussed, the affordable housing industry is complicated, not only for the developer, but the jurisdiction. There are state mandates, whether they be density bonus laws, funding through the low-income housing tax credit. And the fortunate thing about this is that the mandates bring resources to benefit the creation of affordable housing. That also includes design criteria with the expectation that the creative and imaginative approach to all the components of the project. And I'll just take a moment here to clarify the semantics of lower and low. That is a change in semantics and not necessarily a change in threshold. As mentioned, that lower is a broad term. The product as identified as being low income is a low income product. We're not changing those thresholds in the product that's being proposed. So with that, I think we'll go next to the design.
Again, getting back to the architecture itself, the key to this is we were required, or part of the development plan approval was to provide a more modern context type design or theme. That theme was really drawing from Bauhaus International School of Design. The idea is to use repetitive components and modular pieces, if you will, but do it in a way that's interesting. And what it's done is you can see we get positive, negative spaces by the building elements that go vertical. Then we use the balconies themselves to bridge in the horizontal plane. So that's starting to create a lot of, vocabulary or language that allows the building to be a little more interesting. At the same time, affordable to build. That are not a crazy or overly designed or unique, but the massing and color and product or material use is really what we're taking on our palette to go with this look. Next slide. This is the front entry to the Sendero project. That does not look like an affordable housing project by any stretch. It's very edgy, very new, and very fun to be, that would be your main entry. So it's home, and you can see the administrative office has a more of a commercial window feel as you're looking at the entryway, the window wall there. Then the vertical wood columns with the strip lighting. And you can see the balconies and overlooks that the people can have and use to overlook the parking lot and the entry of the project. At the same time, this portal leads into their courtyard, which is where all the kids, the tot lot, the play areas, in a very secure place where they're being supervised and able to be looked, the family can watch their children play below, as well as barbecue and breakout areas for social events. So architectural pieces, we're using standing batten metal roofs for a little bit of break in the horizontal flat roof elements. So it has a little more, comes down in scale. And it just gives a little bit more of a human scale to it. The balconies, for instance, over the administrative office, you can see someone standing on that in that graphic. The idea is you have a two-story element and the balcony at the main entry portal itself, again, a two-story element. To bring it down, so as you're entering in, you're not looking up at a towering elevation. You actually have elements that are down at more of a human, more, acceptable feel. The composite wood you can see is introducing a little more natural material, softens the buildings, and lets us play with stucco and color after that, and using those as the planes recess and push forward. And I think, next slide, please. And that's inlay.
And sorry, just a quick check. I think we're well past the 10 minutes, so yeah.
Sure, we will. Just wanted to touch on some of the site amenities. Here we have a pedestrian paseo that connects Piper Lane to Earthwood along the Anacapa Park apartments. Next slide. And a perspective of that paseo that includes the signage, e-bike parking, and the outdoor patio area for the residents. And then next slide. This is the interior courtyard at Sendero that Murray had mentioned with the various amenities for different ages of play. And some of this is governed by the state and federal requirements for large family-oriented projects that also guide square footages, number of bedrooms, and other items of that nature. Next slide. So we do have information on the discussion items from ARC that John had mentioned. One was the pavement enhancing, pedestrian pavement enhancing. These were the locations based off of ARC's recommendation that connects the pedestrian pathways between the project entries, the trash enclosures, and the bike barns. Next slide. Signage again, based off of ARC's recommendation, made minor modifications, including exterior lit signage. Next one. And then the fence height exception, again, this was something that the drainage swale itself was reviewed by the project and city engineers and was determined to be the preferred design alternative to a vegetative swale because that vegetative swale design was not going to meet the requirements for the drainage easements for that capacity. And of course, I think as mentioned, the Avalanche project has requested and received approvals for other fence height exceptions throughout the project, including next to truss automation. We're using a similar material for the walls and fences that we have throughout the entire project. And in between the fence and the apartments is a vegetated landscaping area for screening. So with that, I can close, or if you want me to touch on some of those items that you had somewhat asked as being applicant items.
I'll bring it back to the commission, see if there's any questions. We can discuss some of the items. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So this is not necessarily in purview, but since we're here, heat pump water heaters, I looked at the energy business on this. Are they inside the unit? Are they using outside air? Do you know how that's working?
I personally do not know offhand. I'm going to look back at the team.
And then the heat pumps for conditioning the spaces, are they the outdoor condensing units all up on the roof? Are they on balconies?
A little bit of both. On the affordable, they're on the ground.
Thank you.
On the affordable side, all of the condenser units are on the ground level, and on the market rate, they are also all on the ground.
Okay. They're just sprinkled around?
Yes.
How about the upper floors? Same thing?
Upper floors are all they're all on the ground.
So everyone has its own condensing unit that goes down?
Correct.
Okay. And
the water heaters are in the corridors.
Are in the corridors?
In the corridors.
Do they use corridor air for the heat pump?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And then on this drainage piece, instead of the swale, I took a bike ride out there, and there's you have this already built on the north side, right? So I know we're not here to debate that. I was just kind of wondering what happens when a kid's soccer ball goes over that fence and lands in that thing.
Have you ever seen the movie Sandlot?
No.
I do recommend it. Such is the nature of the beast.
Okay. Okay. And kind of a dumb question. Are these all going to be rentals? Oh, are they going to be available for purchase? Some of both?
These are all for rent apartments.
Okay, on both sides, market and
Yes.
affordable. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Other questions? Yeah.
So I had two questions. First, I raised one earlier about the bicycle parking on upper floors and how you're handling that particular problem.
Sure. So I think you specifically asked about the alternative parking request that we had made. While condition number 29 isn't explicit to that alternative compliance request, it is implicit in that this was coordinated with the active transportation coordinator. So all of the bike parking is on the lower floor or on the ground floor in the bike barns or in other long-term storage areas, bike rooms. So with that, on the affordable housing project, we are providing 2 bike spaces per unit, and those are all on the ground floor.
Good. I like that. Sounds like a good solution. The second question is about storage. You're not providing garages, so that's, as we know today, a very well-used place for storage for many people. And you do have some storage units. I never saw anything about the cubic feet, but I saw some square foot numbers. But what's the amount of storage provided for each tenant?
I don't have that information offhand. I will look back a little bit to our architect since he's much more familiar with the floor plans.
Yeah, there's storage on every balcony. So those
storage cabinet or closet.
It's a closet, and it has an obviously access door from the balcony
Right.
itself, and they're
Saw
about 4
those.
feet deep, 6 feet wide, if you will, the width of the balcony itself. And every unit has that.
So it may be 200 square feet then if it's 8 feet high.
Yeah.
Something on that. That's good to hear.
Mhm.
We'll have to see how that all plays out. Thank you.
Other questions, comments for the applicant? I think we're good. Thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation. Why don't we turn over to public comments, see if we have any members here with us that would like to speak on this item. Megan, do we have any speaker cards?
No, Chair, we do not. I believe everyone in the audience is a member of the applicant team.
Alrighty now. Well, that sounds good. Well, seeing nobody rushing forward, wishing to speak with us, we'll go ahead and close public comment. At this time, Commission, I'm going to bring it back to you all for any final discussion, any questions you might have that you'd like to throw out, or we can entertain a motion. Yes.
So just general comments. I have one of my good friends is in one of the R1 units, and I've been inside the unit, and it's lovely. And they're very happy. It's a young family. They've got 3 kids, and I also did take my bike through there this week in anticipation of this discussion, and it looks great. The bike path, the new bike path that goes along around by the pond and then comes all the way through over to Earthwood is nice. Obviously, it sort of truncates there, and then it's not done. And then the parks that are built there look terrific, and so the quality of everything to me looked really good. And when I stand there right where between the two, where these units are going to go, I can imagine how it's going to fit. The industrial stuff on Suburban is all, it's all a little distance back. So there is a transition to deal with there, but it seems like you've thought that through with the buffer and the parking and so on. And our thoughts here are really, I mean, I could talk about this all night. There's a lot of interesting things about it, but we're here to decide on this density bonus thing. So I don't see any reason. The biggest thing that I would have wanted to discuss would be all the affordable in one versus spread, but that was already handled, it sounds like, and it's not really our business to redebate that. And obviously the plans have gone pretty far down the road with that assumption. So I think it looks good.
Just to clarify, for the commissioners, tonight isn't just the density bonus, it's the site design layout, it's the parking exception, it's the fence height exception, it's the monument sign exception. So all of that is a part of the purview and decision-making by the commission tonight.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Additional comment? Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say briefly that I also had the same concerns about all the affordable housing being on its own, apart from the market rate. But I think that there, and I know that's not really within our purview, but I just wanted to say that I do think that the very similar designs between the two sides of the development mitigates the wrong word, but seem to integrate it visually, if not actually in location. So that was significant to me.
Commissioner, thoughts?
Yeah, a couple of comments. Just quick response to Justin's concern. The affordable housing market concept has moved much more toward combined facilities because you can offer services so much better and you can provide facilities that actually support people. When you do it that way, when they're all scattered in amongst, that's much harder and generally just doesn't happen. So at minimum, it's a contested issue, but it's certainly, there's certainly some case for this. There's a lot of things about this that are really interesting. We've talked so much about affordable by design, and then it turns out it isn't. Well, one way to certainly move in the right direction is not to provide garages. And I think that's actually a big step forward. Hopefully over time, we'll find that if there are real issues here, it'll be about there's not enough room for my cargo bike. There's not enough room for electric bikes. It's all flat out there. There's a lot of things you can reach. A little cargo bike going to Trader Joe's wouldn't be a bad idea, I don't think at all. It's really good to see finally, this isn't related to this project, I suppose specifically, but how the city is pushing so that the big trash bin areas have cans now for organics and for green waste. And so mostly throughout the state, this has just been a tremendous problem that multiple unit developments just don't end up with any decent service for any of these things. So it's really good to see that's moving through and that it's going to be part of this. I'm glad to see the solar on the roof, and I really like the strong focus on bikes. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens in the manufacturing district with all these people so close. If it all ends up as wine tasting rooms, that's not all bad. We certainly have some of those now, and they're very good ones. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how that area along Earthwood develops over time. I think this really sets the stage for it. So I'm kind of excited about this project. I'd be glad to move it if we, depending on where we are.
And let me just add one thing. If you do make a motion, I've put up a slide that's the actual recommendation from the staff report. And note that if you do include this in your recommendation, we have that one recommended change to the condition of approval. Yeah.
Yes, great. I'd be happy to accept a motion on the item. I would like to say a few thoughts myself, but we can put that motion on there, maybe get a second and.
Well, let's hear it. I might not want to do it.
Doubtful. I was going to jump on the bandwagon and thank you all because as a parent of a toddler, I've definitely made use of the park that's already there in the development, and it's quite nice. And it's, you always appreciate a good play space for your kid. I'm also a homeowner of a relatively new development in town. Unfortunately, I don't think it's one of yours, but I'm very familiar with the experience of moving back or moving into a new space. And finding that community and how exciting it's been for us. So I'm really looking forward for the families that will be coming to this development and for them to have that same experience or their version of that experience. Overall, this is great. I mean, the architecture and the aesthetics, it makes sense. It blends, it looks like one community. There's no real objection to any of this. Even the moving the affordability component into one building makes sense from an economic perspective. There's other elements to this project with multiple developers, with the street coming through, et cetera, that I think, throw some challenges in there. So I understand it. And if this is what we are finding fault with, then we're doing a pretty good job because we're still just complaining that these people are in one of the corners of a very nice new development in town. So I'd just like to thank you all for your work on this, and I appreciate all the comments and all the work that went into this from the applicant and city staff. And I believe we had a motion. I don't know if we heard a second, but I'd be happy to. Oh, so we had an intention of making a motion, so.
Well, I just wanted to move the draft resolution with the, including the change to condition number 16 and all the other language that's on the screen right now. That's my motion.
All right, thank you. So now we do have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Right, second. Any discussion before vote? I believe we'll go for a roll call vote on this one. Yes, Megan?
Commissioner Jorgensen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cooley,
Yes.
Commissioner Houghton,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolly,
Yes.
Chair Munoz Morris.
Yes.
And that motion passes.
Great. Thank you very much. With that, we conclude our public hearing and we'll move on to item 5 or 5A, which is our comment and discussion time with staff updates. Looks like, Tyler, you're gonna start us off and then we have another update as well from Megan. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Chair, members of the commission. Just looking out, our next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is February 28th, and that meeting will be canceled. We do not have any items for that meeting. So that takes us to March, and our next regular meeting is March 13th, and we will have the general plan annual report to present to the commission on that night. There's, I don't, for those that were on the commission last year, and for those that weren't, this is just an overview of how we've done over the year in terms of implementing our general plan policies and programs. It's a summary of development activity, summary of some key projects, capital projects the city's constructed or is implementing now, and kind of a look ahead at our kind of housing numbers, get into the details of the RHNA numbers a little bit more, and then this report then gets forwarded on to the City Council for acceptance. And so that's happening on March 13th. And that's all I have actually in the forecast at this time. We do have some items coming up in April, but that's out there a little bit, so we'll need to fine tune that as we get closer. That's the end of the report.
Oh, question?
Could I ask you a question about a different project? Because people keep asking me, and like for some of the people tonight, this project was approved before I was on the commission, and that's that the big project that's at Broad and Marsh, where the Foster Freeze was. And it seems to go all the way to Higuera, and it's uncovering a lot of archaeological finds. It almost looks like. I'm just curious if you could, maybe at the next meeting, if you're not prepared, but just maybe give us a little summary of what's there and how it's developing and what's involved?
Sure, and we can make that a part of the presentation on the 13th, and we can talk about that project in more detail. I know it is being built in phases, and so but I think that would be a good time for us to kind of dive into a little more detail on that
I
one.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a question too about the Link project that we saw a sort of a sneak preview of almost a year and a half ago, I think. It was quite a while ago. Is that thing still moving through the tube?
The Link project's currently on hold. So that one, we're waiting to hear back from the applicant on whether to kind of move that, re-engage and move that one forward, and we haven't gotten the green light to do that yet.
I have a question. Is there any rumbles about the safe parking? Is that coming back up anytime soon?
The rotating model? Yeah, so staffs can continue to work with faith-based organizations to try to get kind of a minimum number of sites. I think we're getting really close. And so that will come back, obviously, to the Planning Commission for decision on those locations, site-specific conditions and operating parameters for those sites. So it will include, I think, a mixture of city sites as well as faith-based sites.
Great. Thank you. Corey, I think I called you Tyler a second ago because the script threw me off and I've been calling everybody by their first name. So I think it looks like we have an additional update on advisory buddy recruitment.
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Yeah.
So we're wrapping up the annual advisory body recruitment, and I'm happy to report that this year we had an abundance of applicants. In total, we had 71 applicants for 21 positions across 14 advisory bodies. This is quite an increase from years past, so that's really great. It shows that our communications that we're pushing out are having returns, recommendations from advisory body members like yourselves, pulling people in and getting them interested. So that's really encouraging. The Planning Commission interviews are scheduled for Monday the 26th. There's 2 positions open. One was for Commissioner Ringer, who has since resigned from her term, and then Commissioner Tolley. And I'm happy to report that Commissioner Tolley has decided to reapply. And so there's going to be 6 applicants that will be interviewed on that date. Recommendations go to the City Council for final approval on March 19th. So looking forward to having a full commission once again.
Great. Thank you very much for that update, Megan. I'm looking forward to the process as well later this month and to hopefully welcome in some new members soon. So I think with that, just a quick reminder that the next scheduled meeting for February 28th will be canceled. So it looks like we'll be seeing everybody at March 13th. So with that, meeting adjourned. Good night, everyone.